You're listening to the Mythcreant podcast with your hosts, Oren Ashkenazi, Chris Winkle, and Bunny.
There was a castle by a waterfall with a pink and purple wall and a princess living there. She had no parents and was all alone. She got by on her own and she liked it pretty well. 'Cause she never wore socks, she had a pet snake. She bought a red guitar and she ate a whole cake. And there wasn't anybody there to tell her what to do, so she did what she wanted to. Everybody knew the story of the princess who saved herself.
Welcome to the Mythcreant podcast. I'm Chris, and with me is...
Oren.
And we have a very special guest today, Jim C. Hines. He's published over 20 novels, over 50 short stories, and he won a Hugo Award for Best Fan Writer after he took pictures of himself posing like the woman on book covers.
That was great.
Thank you.
And apparently, as I recall, that gave you some back pain.
Some of the poses, yes. You're trying to get both the chest and the backside on the same image. Yeah, you definitely need some ibuprofen afterward.
Of course, because the reader's got to see both boobs and butt.
Well, of course.
Look, the spine must be sacrificed. That's just the way it works.
Right.
Well, welcome to our podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
So, we have some questions that we're going to ask because you have written a lot of books and you have a very cool writing career, and we want to know what you've learned over that time, and we want to share that with our listeners, and in the hopes that we will all benefit from your wisdom.
Wait, I was supposed to have learned something?
Yeah, they tell you that at the end, right? They're like, hey, can you come tell people what you've learned? And you're like scrabbling. Probably something,
Well, why didn't you give me a heads up about this 30 years ago when I started?
First, we have a term that we use a lot at Mythcreants that we call the magnum opus. We use it ironically. It kind of means a mega project that is also usually the writer's first or maybe close to first book that they start on. It's really ambitious that they aren't prepared for. It seems to be pretty common. Have you done that? When you were first starting off, did you have a magnum opus?
Oh, boy. I had two, really.
The magnum opie.
The first one, it was the first book I wrote. I was a junior in college, and it was this grand fantasy adventure of my Dungeons and Dragons character.
Yeah!
His name was Nacor the Purple. He was just very much the stereotypical cool elf character. And every night I would do classes or do some homework and then go sit down and write more about this D&D character. And it was, looking back, terrible. It was full of cliche. It was sloppy, shallow world building. There was no real consistency. He has a falcon companion that I think at one point becomes an owl. It was awful, but I didn't know that. I just knew that I was having fun. I was loving getting into this character and writing all these cool action scenes and things that I thought were very dramatic and even emotional. And then...
Well, it sounds like you discovered that the owl familiar had shape-shifting abilities and could become a falcon. That's cool. That's like an emergent property, I would say.
Now, see, if I was writing it now, that's exactly the BS explanation I would go for. It's like, oh yeah, that's totally. What I actually ended up doing with it, I think probably about 10 years back, I had volunteered for a fundraiser that if you raise this much or bid on this, I will read this awful fan fiction of my character while dressed as the character.
Oh, wow.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And then when I read it and posted the reading, people wanted to know more, which is like, really? My readers are masochists? What's going on? So I ended up self-publishing it. It's called Rise of the Spider Goddess, and it's annotated.
Oh.
It's the manuscript exactly as I wrote it, but then 20 years older and more experienced me doing the Mystery Science Theater treatment throughout. Just all of the snide comments, all of the, oh God, what was I thinking?
That sounds delightful.
It was kind of fun. And I do like putting it out there as just reassurance that we all suck when we start and we get better. But it's okay to suck when you're starting out.
And this, kids, is why you should never get rid of the novel draft. No matter how bad it is, you never know when you might need it for a fundraiser.
Exactly. People might actually pay money to suffer through that.
And you said there was another one?
There was. There was a book called Hamadryad that I was trying to be, this was a few years later. It was more ambitious. It was dealing with female characters and how they're written and sexism and objectification and just getting into a lot of cultural issues. And I was totally not ready to write it.
Mm-hmm. Oh man. We encounter so many writers that they really want to take on important issues, but when you start writing, that's the hardest time to take on something that's, it's ambitious in its own right, because it's sensitive.
Years later, the character came back in part of the Libriomancer books. But yeah, that was like 10 more years of learning how to write, learning how to get a little deeper with the themes, learning how to not be completely heavy-handed about it all.
I'm 16 and I have just heard that religious discrimination is bad. I'm going to write the quintessential novel about Islamophobia, right?
Yeah.
Like, let he who has never done this cast the first stone.
And you don't want to discourage it because it's great that 16-year-old you has discovered this. And I'm very happy that you're exploring, but yeah.
It's good that you want to, and then eventually you will learn the expertise and you can probably do something that will actually work a little better.
Hopefully.
Yeah, like when I get clients who want to do this, I always encourage why they want to and their motivations, and then I try to help them avoid the big mistakes that we all make, right?
I mean, I try to encourage people to start by depicting the world they want to see, right? Instead of taking on all of those like difficult topics when they start. But yeah, no, we've all... My magnum opus was overly edgy and not trying to comment enough, so I've definitely done worse.
I think we've all been there, one way or another.
So, your list of short stories is very impressive. And I noticed, going through your bibliography, that the earliest one I spotted was Whisper of a Dream, published in 1997, which is 9 years before your earliest novel that you have listed, and it looks like you're still writing them. So I'm always telling people to write more short stories, and I would just love to hear more about, what you feel short story writing has done for you, whether it's, your personal happiness or for your career, what you get from doing that.
Oh, that's a good question. When I was starting out, mid-90s, that was the very common advice. That was what I was still hearing from the established writers is, no, start with short stories, break in there, and then you'll build your reputation, build your name, and then you'll be able to sell a novel. I think there was a shift going on at the time, and it didn't really work that way anymore.
I mean, if there was a straightforward path to success, everybody would do it, and then it wouldn't work anymore.
Well, unless the path was hard.
Yeah, it's true. Very true.
But yeah, it's most of the writers I talk to, it's like, how did you break in? And it's a weird story.
Ooh, we love weird stories.
It's never just, it's a straightforward, I did this. It's some weird, circuitous mess. But that said, I mean, I enjoyed writing short stories. I learned a lot about structure, about plotting, some of the basics of just like how to write dialogue, how to structure a paragraph, how to use a semicolon. It didn't necessarily carry over directly to novel writing because a short story is a short story and a novel is a novel and they're different beasts. But some of the basic skills definitely helped when I started doing novels. And I still do them occasionally. I tend more toward the books because the books reach more people. They sell better. I have children and cats to feed. But the short stories, they're a fun break sometimes. It doesn't take a full year for me to write one. I can explore ideas that maybe wouldn't work at 100,000 words, but 3,000 words, this works great.
Yeah.
There was one that was a parody of Sesame Street where a werewolf shows up. And I wrote it as a script for the show. And there's just no way I could have done that at book length. But much shorter. This was fun. This was funny. It didn't get too old by the end. This was great. There are things you can do in the short format that you just can't really do at novel length.
It sounds like that, was a good way to practice in your earlier years.
To some extent, yeah. I do kind of wish I had started writing novels sooner, so I could have gotten better at that more quickly. But honestly, I can't complain. I'm happy with the short fiction output I've had. I'm happy getting my stuff out there in different I'm blanking on words. Professional writing here. In different anthologies, different magazines, just different ways for people to find the stuff.
Well, that makes a lot of sense, because you're absolutely right about there being some things that you can do in short stories that just would not work for novels. I've run into a couple of clients who were trying something like that, where it really felt like what they wanted was a short story that had a very cool, high novelty premise that works for, about 3,000 or 4,000 words, and then it stops working.
Terry Bisson did They're Made of Meat.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's brilliant, and it can't be. It would never work if you kept dragging it out.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
But yeah, at that length, it's perfect.
I do have a short story related question before we go to the next one, actually.
Sure.
Have you ever thought of doing an anthology of, and maybe you already have, and this is an obvious question to Chris, but an anthology of short stories that are they're not chapters in a novel, but they have the same characters and take place in the same world? Is that something that you've looked at?
Sort of a mosaic style.
Yeah.
The closest I've come, there's a sort of a chapbook thing called Goblin Tales that it's got 5 of my goblin-related short stories.
And was that published after the Goblin trilogy?
After, yes. Yeah, I've thought about it. I'm not sure I would. I've never seriously wanted to dive into it, but it's been at the back of my mind sometimes.
Okay. Cool, thank you. I'm always trying to find out information on that, because that's another thing that my clients are often, looking to do, and they want to know how viable is this in the market, and all I can tell them is, well, short stories are hard in general.
Yeah.
So I'm always trying to find more specific information on that.
I will say a lot of times when I see short stories on the market and anthologies like that, it is as a follow-up to a novel, because then you already have a fan base. Right, and people are like, "Oh,
Right.
I'm out of the Goblin novels. I feel sad. Oh, I can read some short stories." It's a nice way to wean fans off of the characters once you're pretty much done.
Well, and sometimes, you've written these books, you've written these characters, and, I find sometimes I just miss them.
Mm-hmm.
I want to go back and play in that world again, or there's an idea that didn't quite make it into the books, but we can put it into a short story and get it out there.
Very cool. All right, so my next question is, when you were, still learning, did you go through any periods of disillusionment when you realized you weren't as far along as you'd hoped?
Oh, I love that you phrase this in past tense.
Yeah, never happens to any of us in the present. Don't worry about it.
Right. No, that's been there pretty much. I won't say from the very beginning, because when I was writing that first really bad D&D magnum opus thing, I thought it was great, and my girlfriend at the time liked it, which, looking back, was probably another sign of her questionable judgment. But then a few years into it, when I started submitting and getting all the rejection letters, there was definitely a lot of discouragement. And in some ways, it was harder in those first few years because I didn't realize how bad I was. Um,
Yeah.
I didn't know how much I had to learn. I couldn't look at my own work and see the problems. And then, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 years in, I guess it was like flipping a switch. And, maybe it came from doing some writing workshops, working with other people, learning to critique. I started seeing the problems. And, this was in some ways very discouraging, but in some ways this was great because, I can fix that. I can go in and make it better. But the discouragement, the depression, the feeling like I'm not as good as I want to be, that's always there off and on. Even, now 30 years since I started doing this, I am currently working on the first draft of a new book, and my first drafts tend to be really bad. It's just, vomit up all the ideas onto the page. We'll fix it later.
As is the nature of a first draft.
Right. I mean, I might argue that by their nature, they...
Right. But as I'm sitting there writing it, I'm still having that thing in my mind, that voice that says, oh, so this is the book that everybody's going to realize you've been faking it this whole time. And all of your other stuff, you're this horrible, terrible writer that you've just somehow managed to fool people.
Well, I mean, it's got to happen to us all eventually. Eventually they will figure it out.
Right. We're just trying to postpone it for as long as possible.
I have a follow-up question, because you mentioned that you gained the ability to see what was wrong, and that motivated you to want to make changes and want to fix things. Was that like your main way of getting through the disappointment, or did you have something else going on?
Ooh, getting through the disappointments.
Tell us your coping strategies. We need them.
Ice cream.
Very good, very good.
Probably the worst. The first time I almost sold a book to a major publisher, and I had gotten all excited about it, and then they pulled the offer.
Ouch.
Eesh.
And I crashed hard. Looking back at it, it's like, no, Jim, you wrote a book that a major publisher, at least initially, wanted to buy. This is good.
Right. It was a sign you were getting closer, but
no, it's probably the worst writing depression crash that I've had. And it lasted a month or two. And the coping mechanism that brought me out of it was the birth of my second child.
Wow.
I don't necessarily recommend this for every time you get a rejection.
Yeah, you can see how that might have other consequences.
Right. That could cause other forms of depression and overwhelmed.
I don't know. Maybe you can just create your own readership. Just
Oh. Honey?
eventually you'll have enough.
Yeah, I'm 51. I don't think that's happening at this point.
Thank you. That's very touching. We have a lot of people, obviously a lot of writers go through this disillusionment phase, I think because a lot of us are lied to, basically, by culture about what it entails.
Oh, yeah.
And so, all of those movies about like, just write with your heart.
Oh, God.
And it just magically assembles itself.
Just sit down and the words flow. And a year from now, you'll be in your limousine with your agent sipping champagne as you drive to your book launch.
And man, if we just treated it like other professions, I think people would be so much better off. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. So we'd like to hear about your writing process. Is it different now than when you started? I've heard from many writers that over time, they tend to do a little bit more planning when they find something. Oh, I wish I had accounted for that. And then they plan a little more. Is that you, or do you have is it pure chaos? Is it very orderly? What's your style?
It's definitely more chaos than I would like. I've got to have an outline. I learned that pretty early on. My brain is not big enough for a whole book. I can't hold it all in my head. I don't, if I just write from the seat of my pants, I meander all over the place and I don't know where I'm going. The problem I run into is, what my process has evolved into is I write the outline, then I start writing the book. Then I get about 10,000 words into the book and I realize my outline is broken. So I go back and I write a new outline. Then I write the next part of the book, get maybe halfway through, maybe even 2/3 if I'm lucky, break the outline again, and, repeat until you finally have a messy first draft that I can work with. But I would love to be able to get the outline right the first time. And I keep feeling like, okay, you've written 20 plus books. You should know how to do this. But I think part of the process with every book is learning how to write that book. Because whatever you figured out on the last one may or may not apply.
I've certainly seen many books by authors where there's one book that just does really well because the author just happened to fit in that perfect formula. And then you see them just make a slight change to the books and suddenly it doesn't, work together as well anymore. And yeah, right, stories are so niche in how they work. So it sounds like for you, you feel like when you write into a roadblock, it's something that you could have accounted for in the outline, as opposed to you came up with a new idea and then started wandering away from where your outline was.
It's a bit of both. Sometimes it's realizing that what I put into my outline was stupid or obvious or boring. And sometimes it's more like you were saying that, the outline is perfectly fine, but, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? Or this character that I didn't think was very important is a lot of fun. I'm going to write them another scene and see what happens. Yeah, there's definitely some discovery to it, at least for me.
Sounds like a good way for your outline to break. If you find something fun and you want more of it.
Hopefully, yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. Hopefully it's breaking better.
Yeah. And like going back to your outline, I mean, that just sounds like the right move. You find something new and fun, you go back and, count for it. Yeah, that sounds great. I mean, that would not be something that I would worry about, but certainly with other things, again, sometimes people just take more and more notes every time they outline, but, it doesn't work for everybody.
And it's a frustrating process a lot of the time, but it seems to work for me. Readers don't see all of the outlines and all of the drafts. They just see the finished product. So however you get there.
Once you have the first draft, the one that we've been describing as, often very messy, is there a single process that you go through for revision, or is it different with every book?
There's not a single identical process. Usually when I finish the first draft, at that point, I have a much better sense of the story and what it's about and who these characters are. So I'll read through it, I'll make notes, but most of the time I'm pretty anxious and eager to just jump in and start writing it again from page 1. And I'll use that first draft as sort of the new outline and the new basis. But now I know where it's going, and now I can develop and add in all the description and start layering in theme and foreshadowing and inside jokes and all of that fun stuff.
Yeah, we love it.
Yeah. The second draft is so much more fun than the first draft.
That's great. Do we have time for maybe one more?
Yeah, I think we have time for one more because we want to make sure.
Any preferences, Jim? Do you have a preference for what question? If we have
Do
time for one
not
more.
choose your favorite.
So we'll go with our last question, and then because we want to hear about your upcoming project.
Okay.
Tell us the story of how you got your first trad publishing deal for a novel.
Well, that would be Goblin Quest. That was the one that I was talking about that had the very tragic backstory. Goblin Quest was weird. Most books take me about a year to write. I wrote and revised Goblin Quest in 6 weeks.
Wow.
Damn.
I had just moved back to Michigan. I was unemployed. I had no social life. This is all part of it. But yeah, I wrote it, and it was It was the book where I stopped worrying about what I'm supposed to be writing and just had fun with it. And then started sending it out to publishers, sending it out to agents, collecting all of the rejections, and getting on with life. Eventually, a smaller publisher said, "Hey, we like this. We'll pay you a small advance. We'll do a library edition. We'll get this book out there." And by this time, it had been rejected by pretty much everyone. There were one or two publishers that had been sitting on it for a year and a half with no response. So I figured, okay, this is great. I'll have a book. I did email those last few holdouts saying, "Hey, just letting you know, you've probably moved on long ago, but I got a deal, so withdrawing the book." Another year passes. The book comes out from the small press, and 2 months later, the publisher who had had it at this point for probably 2.5 years
Mm-hmm.
sends me an email with revisions saying, these are the things we want you to work on.
Oh.
And by the way, we want to buy this book.
Oh, no.
And I just say, wait, what? No, I can't, and so for a while, there was this sense that, well, the small publisher put out a hardcover, but they didn't buy mass market rights. So maybe you could take the mass market rights. Maybe I can salvage this. I was able to get an agent through this just by querying a few agents and saying, "Hey, I have a really weird situation and I need help."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Joshua at Jabberwocky, I still remember the phone call. He called and said, we'd like to help you with your problem. The deal with that publisher fell through.
Oh.
I went into my depression until my kid was born, but I had an agent now. And the agent was saying, "Look, you've done this once. You can do it again. Write the next book. We'll still be here." And I ended up writing another Goblin book because I didn't know what else to do.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it did get a publisher's attention.
Right.
So yeah, why not?
So the agent sent it out to some publishers, and we got some interest from 2 of them. And one of them said, I really like this book. It's a lot of fun, but it feels like book 2. It feels like it's a sequel to something. And my agent said, "Well, it's funny you should mention that because we do still have mass market paperback rights for this first book." And Daw Books ended up buying both of them.
Oh, that's great.
So it
Nice.
eventually worked out even better. But it was just bumpy and ugly and not how I would recommend breaking in.
At the same time, it sounds like you did the right things, right? Part of the trickiness of situations, agents want you to have a publisher, publishers want you to have an agent.
Right.
So you're able to use what interest you got to get an agent. It sounds like you made the right moves, even though it was hard.
I was trying to, and when you're new, you don't know what the rules are. Did I screw up by going to an agent? Should I have not submitted it until I got the official rejection 2.5 years later? It was rough. I don't look back and think, oh, I really messed up here. It was just messy.
It does sound really hard, but I don't know if I would say it worked out, but I'm glad that it had a positive ending at least.
I mean, in the long run, I think it worked out great. I have been very, very happy with Daw. Almost all of my books have been with them. I've been with them almost 20 years now. So I'm pleased.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you want to tell us about Kite Master?
Sure. Ironically, not with Daw. This one was a smaller press title because it's hard to summarize. It doesn't have a nice pitch line. Like my next book with Daw in October is Buffy the Vampire Slayer crossed with the Golden Girls.
That sounds very
Great.
new.
But Kite Master, it doesn't have that punchy one sentence summary. It's
that high concept.
Yeah, it's this fantasy world. which is very much built on my sense of wonder. It started out just because I read something about fighting kites and thought, oh, that's really cool.
They are really cool, so, good instinct.
I know, right? So I built a world around that, where wind is eternal, it never stops. And so all of the technology and magic is sort of wind-based. And you have kite masters who can manipulate the wind and control the things that fly on it. And you have kite ships, which the physics were a little tricky, but if you put a kite master on and mix in a little magic, you can fly around on these ships with huge kite sails. And you've got stars that don't actually work like the stars in our world. They're more of a river of stars that flow through the night faster or slower. It depends on the wind.
That's going to make horoscopes hard.
Yeah, they don't do horoscopes.
That sounds super cool, though.
And you've got dragons who are like half a mile long, who live in the stars. And when a star falls, the dragons eat them to keep the stars from hitting the world.
Oh, that's cool.
It's all of these ideas that made me happy, that made me think, oh, cool, I want to see that. And then layered onto this is the story of Niall, who is a 21-year-old widow who discovers that she's a kite master and gets drawn into this, fantasy adventure to stop the queen, who is raising an army of kite masters to, without getting into spoilers, do very bad things. And so Niall, she's grieving, but she's also fighting and learning and exploring. And there's sort of a found family thing going on with her two friends on the kite ship. And it's a book. It's one that I'm very proud of. I think it's one of the best ones that I've done, but it's definitely not quite as commercial as most of my stuff.
I'm looking at the cover, and I really think that it kind of conveys that sense of wonder.
Oh, the cover's beautiful, isn't it?
Yeah. Looking over this very pretty landscape, and yeah, no, that sounds great. It sounds like a wonderful read. I certainly look forward to testing it out myself.
I hope you like it.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me. This has been fun.
All right. Well, I think that will about do it for this episode.
If you enjoyed this episode, consider supporting us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/Mythcreants.
And before we go, I want to thank a couple of our existing patrons. First, there's Amon Jabber. He's an urban fantasy writer and a connoisseur of Marvel. Then there's Kathy Ferguson, who's a professor of political theory in Star Trek. We will talk to you next week.
There was a dragon with a pointy tail. He was bigger than a whale and his breath was terrible. He scared the princess when he came around. Tried to burn the castle down, but she caught him by his tail. Then she tied him to a tree so the dragon couldn't fly. She told him he was mean and it made the dragon cry. When he finally apologized, she offered him some tea. He accepted it graciously. Now he visits every weekend with the princess who saved herself.
This has been the Mythcreant podcast. Opening closing theme, The Princess Who Saved Herself by Jonathan Colton.